Hey, everybody. Welcome to Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. It's the hell's today? Friday, April 18th. It's our fifth show of the offseason. It's officially the final show of week one of the offseason. I know we've got a long way to go. I'm Dan Bespris at Dan Bespris on social media. I see we've had a font shift here. I would like that to be. There we go. That's the one. That's the good stuff. That's the good stuff. Today, we're going to be talking about the rookie class because you guys know over the years, I've had a pretty long-standing tradition of telling all of you to ignore them, don't draft them, mostly malign them, with the very slight tweak over the last, call it 2 to 3 seasons, where I said I got to soften my stance on rookie big men. And let's see how that worked out from the 2024 rookie class, which by all accounts was considered one of the worst rookie classes in recent memory. We're going to throw this, it's from NBA.com. This is just the 2024 draft, and we'll work our way through the board, piece by piece, inch by inch. Slowly I turned. Does anybody know that reference? It's a Niagara Falls. Zachary Risa-Shea was the first pick in the draft. By all accounts, he seems like a pretty decent young basketball player, but by all accounts, he did not have a very good fantasy season. Risa-Shea finished, I'm looking at the last month, finished overall at number 240 in 9 category leagues. And if you're thinking, oh, did he have terrible turnovers? Nope. 46% from the field, 71 at the free throw line. He averaged 12.5 points, 3.5 boards, assist, 1.2 combined defensive stats, and 1.5 3-pointers. Yes, it was a little bit better down the stretch, where over the final month, he averaged 16, 3, and 1 with 2 3-pointers, shot the ball better at 52%, which feels largely unsustainable. Still didn't get many defensive stats. Again, doesn't really rebound. What are we doing here? That's a big no. People took a shot on him because they were like, oh, he's the first overall pick. He'll probably get to play a ton. There are very few avenues that you could take to get Risa-Shea to value. Down the stretch, if you were punting free throws, it put him relatively close to the top 100, but still not all the way there because he just doesn't do much besides shoot. Even when the minutes were huge, even when the games were big, it was still mostly just 3-pointers and points. And he'd have, a good field goal percent game, but didn't shoot the free throw, didn't rebound, didn't pass, didn't steal, didn't block. Nope. Not a big man, though, so he was a guy that we were going to ignore anyway. How about Alex Sarr? He was one that I, throughout the year, thought, I'm willing to take a kind of a chance on this dude. Did it work out? Nope, not really. Let's see. I guess we'll go full season first, and then we'll work our way backwards. Over the full season, Sarr was number 163, 13 points, 6.5 boards, 2.5 assists, 2.2 defensive stats, 1.5 3-pointers, a miserable 39% from the field, and 68% free throw line. Only 1.7 turnovers. He was also a little bit better down the stretch, just for whatever that's worth, when the Wizards kind of leaned fully into the tank, and he improved to number 136 during that stretch. It still wasn't, I guess, what you'd call a good outcome. Kind of an amazing little footnote is that for the season, he shot 39.4%. For the last month, he shot 39.4%. Free throws were better. He was up to 75.5. 15, 6, and 2.5 were about the same as throughout the year. 2 defensive stats, pretty close to the same throughout the year. And yeah, I mean, pretty much every sample size you take from Sarr, the numbers were almost exactly the same. He was, by all accounts, a perfectly solid punt field goal big man, which is, I know, kind of a weird one, but like if you were in that, I want to build a team that's kind of Jaren Jackson-esque. Not that JJJ is a punt field goal guy, but, big man who doesn't rebound a ton, but does block shots, does hit 3-pointers, does score a little bit, does pass a little bit. And by the end of the season, the free throw number wasn't that cataclysmic in its awfulness. So, there was a pretty easy path to get Sarr into playable value, and that was to make him a punt field goal big. But when you drafted him, is that what you were hoping for? He was right around the edge of the top 100 if you were punting field goals for the season. If you were punting free throws for the season, he didn't quite move that far up the board. And again, down the stretch, his free throws were better anyway. In the field goal remained about the same. So close, but not quite, and certainly not worth using a top 100 pick on. Reed Shepherd went to the Rockets third. He did nothing. Stephon Castle went to the Spurs fourth. He was an interesting one because Castle was like your prototypical points league kind of player in that, like, you legitimately had to punt a couple of things to get him to value. Down the stretch, I'm trying to figure out if we could get Castle even inside the top 200 down the stretch. He was number 151 if you were punting field goal, free throw, and turnovers. I don't know. Does the turnover really make that big of a difference? I guess so. That's for the year. Obviously, partway through the season, the Spurs traded for De'Aaron Fox. Did that change Castle's value all that much? A little bit. He actually ended up doing more as the season wore on, but I don't know that it was necessarily directly tied to the Fox thing. Still, if you were punting all three of those and you went points league, second half of the year, he was right around a top 100 guy. How about the last 2 months? Did it get better? Top 95 range. Pretty similar, really. The only difference there is mostly just the players around him shifted a little bit. And then down the stretch, once the Spurs went into more of a tank mode, when Wemby was out, when Fox was out, that's when Castle was much better. Again, punting all 3 points league eliminators, field goal, free throw, and turnover. Then he was top 60 in points league. But that's just the last month. And again, that's just punting a triplicate, a triple punt. So, nope. And so many times throughout the year, I had people yelling at me like, you got to be higher on Stephon Castle. I'm a fantasy analyst. I'm a 9-cat fantasy analyst. And in 9-cat, he wasn't good. In reality, kind of a fun young ball player. 9-cat, not good. Ron Holland, nope. Tijon Salon, nope. Donovan Clingan. Let's pause on Donovan Clingan for a minute because of all the players that we've discussed so far, he's the closest to a full season value. He was just a few slots ahead of Alex Sarr. He's 4 slots ahead of him on the season, which you cannot assess Donovan Clingan as a full season analysis right now. And before we get to Donovan Clingan, we got to remind you guys that Bet Online is back with us here on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. It's so nice to have them back. Bet Online, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all online sports betting action. Baseball season is in full swing. We're to the home stretch for the NBA and the NHL playoffs. NBA play-in tournament wraps up tonight, as it turns out. Playoffs start tomorrow, and Bet Online has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, and even live in-game betting while the action is being played. You can go there right now. You can see the live action while I'm recording this show. What do we got here? What's live at the moment? It looks like tennis. Tennis is live right now over at Bet Online. Yeah, you can live bet tennis. If you think somebody's about to wrap it up, boom, you can live bet them. It's going to cost you. It's a little chalky, but whatever. Obviously, you can bet on the NBA playoffs. Miami Heat, Atlanta Hawks. That's a pick 'em tonight. So money line, spread, same. If you're into that sort of thing. Dallas, 6-point underdogs at Memphis with Ja Morant, a game time call. He'll play. Ja's going to play. But you might want to look at Dallas if you think Ja's banged up in any way. Mavs are not as awful as everybody thinks because they've got their big dudes back in there now. Yeah, they're going to have some issues scoring with no Kyrie, but Memphis doesn't really guard anyone. I think that's going to be a pretty good ball game. And then you get into the real action tomorrow. Bucks at Pacers. That one, Bucks have shifted back to a slight favorite with Damian Lillard being ruled in, although he hasn't played in a month and a half after the deep vein thrombosis. Clippers and Nuggets. Nugs are a 2.5-point favorite. Actually, it's really interesting that the Bucks are still not. The spread and the money line don't. Oh, there we go. That's where they line up. Nuggets 2.5-point favorite. Knicks 7-point favorite. Lakers 4-point favorite. That's the stuff that's going on tomorrow. You can get down on all of that over at Bet Online, or if you don't want to bet on those, in between games, you can head to the Bet Online casino. They get all these really fun Vegas-style games, live casino games, poker, slots, things like that. Bet Online. The game starts here. And let's talk Donovan Clingan. You can't look at Donovan Clingan's entire season because at the beginning of the year, he was a complete non-factor. He didn't play. He was behind DeAndre Ayton. On the rare occasion that Robert Williams was around, he was sort of splitting minutes with the Time Lord. And so there was just no reason to have him on your roster. If you drafted him, you dropped him almost immediately when you saw that he basically wasn't going to be playing. And so for Clingan, you almost have to treat him as a mid-season draft pick. And in that instance, he worked out just fine. He was a punt free throw grab by about the midway point of the basketball season. Final 3 months of the year, if you were punting free throws, he was number 91. That's not bad at all. Bad foul shooter. But second half of the year, played 22 and a half minutes, 7 points, 9 boards, 1.7 blocks, 54% from the field. Not great field goal percent. I think we'd like to see get a little higher. But those blocks, that's useful. And then, of course, as the season went on, Ayton got shut down. Time Lord was hurt. Donovan Clingan as a punt free throw guy for the last 25 games, he was top 60, fifth rounder. 8 points, 10 boards, 1.8 blocks. Still a bad foul shooter, but it got better and better as the season went on. So again, you had to be in the right team build. He was top 45 the last 12 games of the year, 8.5 points, 10 boards, 2.6 defensive stats, only 0.7 turnovers. That actually went down a little bit. So he was very good for punt free throw teams down the stretch. And he was close enough there where even if you weren't punting free throws, he was actually still a top 75 play. But that's, again, when he was just sort of fully unleashed. He played 27 minutes a game. He was playable in all formats at that point. But that's saying something because he's the only player we've talked about so far that's playable in all formats without a punt. So Donovan Clingan at 7 is your best rookie pick so far. And that's really only the last 3 to 4 months of the year, but really, really, really only like the last 2 months. So sorta. We're going to give Donovan Clingan a sorta after everybody else basically got a no and Alex Sarr got a, but what if we do this one thing? And Stefan Castle got a, what if you're in points leagues? Rob Dillingham didn't really play this year. Zach Edey, another big man. How does he shape up with everything that's going on? The answer is didn't stack up all that well until Memphis fired Taylor Jenkins. That was when things pivoted for Edey. He is the best. He's the highest ranked, I think, of any rookie, actually. Oh, no, Khalil Ware is ahead of him. He's the second highest ranked rookie on the board from this year at 135 for the season in about 22 minutes a ball game. But the good stuff for Edey really came in small bumps. And it mostly came when John Morant was healthy. A pick and roll that they sort of weren't running for a long time was the way that Edey got involved. And he's not a bad foul shooter. He's not as great as a shot blocker as Clingan. But, if you look at the last, say, month of the year, I guess, which is around when Jenkins got fired, Edey was pretty close to the edge of the top 100. 9.5 boards, 11 rebounds, 1.2 blocks. That's, again, where Clingan had the edge. 1.7 turnovers. That's where he has a little bit of a knockback. But 72.5% at the free throw line, 57 from the field. Solid percentages for a traditional center who didn't take three-pointers. So I guess, like, if you had just rolled up Zach Edey's all season long, he only played 67 games, so he wouldn't have been a totals play. But, if you were in a big man build, he would have made sense. Still kind of more like a maybe than anything else. But I will say this, I'm kind of optimistic about him going into next year because we saw some good stuff down we call it the deep stretch, which I guess is how we get our quads loose. Because the last 10 games, he averaged 13 rebounds. You can't find that on the wire. So I do think Edey's going to be a top 100 guy next year, but he wasn't this season. Let's see. Cody Williams for the Jazz. Nope. Midas Buzelis for the Bulls. Obviously did nothing until the trade deadline and then did kind of next to nothing for about a month after that. The last call it like 3-ish weeks, Buzelis was a top 75 play. But can we, where was he for the last month? Last month, he was top 90. Can we call that a good rookie? No. I mean, it took a lot of guys going down. And he kind of cut himself loose. It was that Laker game where he really woke up, and he was pretty good after that stretch. 14 points, 5 boards, 1.7 assists, 2 threes, a steal, and 1.2 blocks his last 15 games. That's pretty good. Well-rounded. Didn't hit the free throws all that well, but was, just slightly sub-average in points, boards, and assists, and, good enough there where you're like, all right, that's basically a net neutral. And he became pretty close to a neutral fantasy player in almost every category and a small victor in blocks. That's playable. If you're neutral in everything, you're like a top 65, top 70 guy. That's pretty good, actually. So Buzelis, he's showing signs. We can certainly say that about Matas. He did not wake up when everybody wanted him to. It's why I continued to fade him after the trade deadline, because the Bulls still had just too many guys that were going to be usage dudes. But then you saw Kobe White go down for a little bit. Vooch went out for a little while. Did we lose? Josh Giddey woke up in a big way, and then he went down for a little bit. So there was a lot of opportunity that showed up. And for Buzelis, we need him to get to 10 shots or more. That's kind of where we're at. He's got to be involved, or it's not going to work. I truly don't know what the plan is for his playing time for next year, but he did show some signs down the stretch, and he's probably worth kind of a late flyer next year because he wasn't good for the first 65 games, and then he was pretty good for like the last 15. Not a rookie that you can say, oh yeah, we should have drafted him, but certainly one that we should have picked up down the deep stretch. We can skip over a couple of these guys. Bub Carrington ended up on the Wizards. He had like 2 or 3 games in there where he was pretty good, but definitely not someone you wanted to draft. And now we get to number 15 in the draft, Khalil Ware, who ended up as arguably the best rookie in the rookie class from a fantasy standpoint. Ware was number 126 in 9 category leagues on the year. And that is basically at the beginning of the season, he was posting pretty much zeros. Second half of the season, he was number 89 in 27.5 minutes per game. And it stretched a little bit longer than that. It's not easy to pull up, last 4 months or whatever. I'd have to click a couple of things. Basically, he got pushed into minutes pretty close to the halfway point, a little bit before that. And he and Bam Adebayo started playing side by side a bunch. Second half of the season, Ware averaged 11 points, 10 boards, 1.9 defensive stats on 54% from the field and 71% at the free throw line. Just a traditional, solid big man line, which is basically like the Jonas Valanciunas with more athleticism. And it feels like he's a guy that ended up, because of that, being a dude you probably could have rostered all year. He was not, I don't want to say he was banged up. He just didn't play at the beginning of the year. He played in 65 games. In the second half of the season, he played, I think, in all 41. I don't know that he missed a single game. It was like the last 3 months he played in basically, he might have missed 1 or 2 in there, but he was extremely durable once they started actually trotting him out for minutes. It was the beginning of the year. He was just getting DNPs. So, no, you couldn't really draft even Ware, who was, again, arguably the best rookie to have on your roster this year. Certainly the longest stretch of value of any of them. But once he emerged, then he deserved to be on rosters the rest of the way. You may be noticing a theme, by the way, as we continue. Now we can start to move a little bit faster through this stuff because we're through most of the names that matter. Not all of them. There are a couple left. Sixers drafted Jared McCain. He actually had a brief stretch where he had value before he blew out his leg. Dalton Connect, he had 2 games where he was pretty good. Tristan Da Silva on the Magic, he also had about 2 games in there. Jacoby Walter on the Raptors, he had about 3 games. Jalen Tyson, go Bears. Not Cal Bears. There's 3 Bears drafted in a row. Baylor Bear, Cal Bear, Baylor Bear. Eve Missy at number 21 is the next name we will pause upon, who definitely did not deserve to be drafted on the season. But once it became clear that the Pelicans were going to be a complete bleep show from a health standpoint, then he became, sort of kind of close to value. But still mostly ranked outside the top 200 for I mean, I guess you could go like a punt free throw build and then he moves onto the board. But like, this is a dude that was truly awful at the foul line. And, you know, if you were picking him up, you had to factor that into account. If you're punting free throws, Missy was number 124 on the season because he played 27 minutes a game. He was like largely a part of what the Pelicans did because they didn't have a big man at all. And then they didn't have Zion for a long stretch. And then they didn't have Brandon Ingram for basically the entire season. And then Herb Jones went down, and then Trey Murphy went down, and so on and so on and so forth. And that was a team that just was like dead from the get-go, and they've already let go of their GM, and they've already brought in a new one. Didn't take very long. Missy this year averaged 9 points, 8 boards, 1.3 blocks on 55% shooting, and a kind of a medium volume, 62% at the foul line, which put a pretty good dent into you. Donovan Clingan-esque is a 60%er on the year, but Missy took more. He got to the foul line more than these other bad free throw shooting big men. So that was, again, the story on Missy. You know, if you picked him up and you punted free throws, he was close to 9-cap playable. 73 games made him a totals useful play for a punt free throw team. But it was really more like little stretches in there that he became actually valuable. And it sort of follows then that he doesn't really need to have been drafted. DeRon Holmes, no. A.J. Johnson, no. Keyshawn George, he didn't do anything for a long stretch, but then he was, again, showed promise the second half of the season because he did a little bit of everything, but also was a very bad percentages guy. So he ended up kind of a points league dude. Last couple months of the year, Keyshawn was number 123, despite shooting 39% from the field and 72% at the free throw line, because he was at 10 points, 5 boards, over 3 assists, 1.3 steals, 1.1 blocks, 2 3-pointers. He has huge fantasy potential. If you're in a keeper or a dynasty format, I love the potential of Keyshawn George. But if you were trotting him out there in a league where you cared about field goal percent, you were in real trouble. Luckily, once he became more of a fixture in the Wizards rotation, he was a punt field goal percent play. And a decent one at that. But you'll notice we're making a lot of excuses. And now you can speed through almost the rest of the board. Anybody else? Isaiah Collier for Utah. He had some stretches as a punt multiple things guy. You want to look down the stretch on Collier, really since the trade deadline is when Isaiah jumped into the mix. He was not terrible at field goal percent, absolutely atrocious at turnovers. And that still wasn't enough to get him inside the top 100. So even when he was piling up 7, 8, 9 assists per ball game, you needed to basically punt, free throw, turnover, maybe field goal, possibly 3-pointers as well. He was a hard assists play, but he didn't do much else for you. Jonathan Mobo had 1 or 2 games in there. Kyle Filipowski had like 3 weeks when they finally shut Walker Kessler down. And you can speed through the second round. Jalen Wells played a lot for the Grizzlies, but never really, you didn't see much in the way of actual fantasy game. Adem Bona had about 2 great weeks for Philly at the very end of the regular season. KJ Simpson was borderline. Pelly Larson had like 2 days. Antonio Reeves had like 4 games at the end of the year. You guys get the idea at this point. Bronny James, we're down into that part of the draft now. And so what did we learn from all of this? The simple answer is the closest players to value, the closest ones, we'll zoom in on the whole draft board so folks on YouTube can see the whole damn thing, were big men. Khalil Ware at 15, who had a really good summer league, to his credit, on a team that didn't really have an opening at center, and they created it for him because he's so intriguing. Ware had probably the longest stretch of actual legitimate value of anybody on the board. Donovan Clingan and Zach Edey were also close to value for stretches. And these are guys where you're either punting one thing or none things, and it was still like decent enough. Alex Sarr was a punt field goal big. And then you get to Stephon Castle, who was the, points leagues only. Keyshawn George for like the last 2 months. He was punt something. You basically had to punt something. And Modest Bazelis for the last month. And that's kind of the entirety of the board. Unless you wanted to talk about Isaiah Collier and that, hard assists sprint if you were trying to make a play in that one category. What do a lot of these guys have in common? Not Collier necessarily and not Castle necessarily, but every other name that I just said is a center. And I get it. 9-cat rankings can skew the board a little bit. Well, I had trouble saying the word skew. It's not that hard of a word. I'm sleepy today. It's because rookie centers are not counted, not relied upon to do much other than Alex Sarr, which is why he had to be a punt field goal guy. But Klingon, Edey, Ware, even if you go down to Yves Missy, these are guys that were expected to basically set big screens, block shots, and dunk the basketball and rebound. And they mostly did it. And the differences between those guys largely came down to how good or bad they were at free throw shooting. Edey was the best among them. Ware was probably second. And then you get into the like straight punt big free throw dudes like Missy and Donovan Klingon, and then you're looking for playing time. And none of them got any to start the year. So none of these guys should have been drafted, as it turns out. But as the season went on, it became clear that Ware belonged on rosters when the Heat shoehorned him into a much larger role. Klingon's role kept growing as guys went down for Portland. Missy's role was pretty big, but you really had to need his three strong categories. And then Zach Edey, who again looked much better at the very end, and we'll see if Memphis makes any personnel changes in the offseason. I'm actually curious to see how much Edey plays in their game against the Mavs today. I would assume it's going to be a decent amount because the Mavs are gigantic, but I guess I don't know for sure. And Memphis, Edey only played, well, Edey actually had big minutes against the Warriors, which is, I guess, sort of encouraging. I think he's a guy that profiles better for next year because Memphis looked like they were maybe pivoting back into an offense where he would have to set a bunch of screens and actually be involved in the action more, as opposed to a lot of, spread the floor, cutting ball movement kind of thing. But again, literally, there was not one rookie from this class inside the top 100 in straight 9 category value. You could get a couple of them damn close by punting one thing. Khalil Ware, I think you actually got inside the top 100 by punting one thing. He was the only one. The other guys, you could get close. Sarr, you got really, really close with punt field goal. And Klingon and Edey, well, Klingon really very close if you're punting free throws. Edey, same general idea. These guys got really close, but not dudes you needed to take a shot on draft night. This draft is going to be a little bit different. This last one that we just talked about today was a particularly whack draft. But, you're going to have Cooper Flagg, who people are going to take extraordinarily early, and there are going to be other names that pop up. But the things to watch for are guys like the one I like to turn the clock back to is Mark Williams. Find a big man who's not a bad foul shooter going to a team that needs a big man. That's your avenue. And none of these really was all that simple. We didn't know if Edey was going to get big minutes or if they were going to run JJJ at the 5. We knew the Blazers had DeAndre Ayton in the way, Time Lord in the way. The Heat had Adebayo in the way. Pelicans didn't have a big man, but also had the opportunity to run super small, and you figured they weren't going to go sort of traditional big until they had to. Sarr was the only one where you're like, oh, big man on a team that needs a big man. And then they, insisted on playing Valanciunas 20 minutes a game, and Sarr couldn't shoot, and so there were all these other things that went on. But the end of the summary is, once again, yes, we need to be a little bit softer in our anti-rookie stance when it comes to bigs, but overall, rookies suck. They do. Once in a blue moon, you get Cat, or you get Anthony Davis, or you get a rookie where you're like, oh my God, like Wemby. But they are the exception. They are not the rule. And at the same time, think of the names I just said. Those are bigs. The last rookie guard, I mean, okay, like if we really had to do it live on air, NBA draft, let's see, 2023. Did we have a rookie guard in that class that was any good? No. I don't think so. How about 2022? I mean, the one that sticks out in my mind is Damian Lillard from like 15 years ago. There are not many rookie guards that look good out of the chute. There were plenty of really good rookies the year before. 2022 had some good rooks, but they weren't guards. The guards, they just struggle. They just do. There were a lot of good rookies in 2022, and they were mostly big men or big wings. Folks that follow rookie classes closer than I do will probably come up with a rookie guard from more recent than Damian Lillard, but there aren't many. Because Cade was what, like top 90 his rookie year? Was that the best we can get at this point? And you had to spend a 90 range pick to get him, so it still wasn't even a value. Rookie big men, they can do it. Evan Mobley was good in his rookie year. Anyway, you guys get the idea. Let's wrap it up. Thanks for watching, everybody. This is off-season week number 1 here on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. Stay tuned to our YouTube page and to the Young Man Squad Fantasy Basketball podcast because Noah's first episode is dropping today. That's right. It's coming out later on today. He has Red Bauer on the show, and they break down, you guessed it, rookies. And they can laugh at me as they watch this one because they're looking at all these guys from a dynasty standpoint, and I can wipe my hands of that nonsense. I'm Dan. Have a great weekend, everybody. I'm back with you on Monday. Like, rate, subscribe. You guys know the drill at this point, and I'll see you guys, I don't know, whenever the hell I see you. So long for now.